meeting. Ms. Hill, may you call roll to confirm a quorum?
Councilmember Abdelgawad.
Here.
Councilmember Boehner.
Present.
Councilmember Burke.
Present.
Councilmember Holman.
Present.
Councilmember Hubach.
Present.
Councilmember Kellogg.
Present.
Councilmember Moorhead.
Present.
Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Mayor Kirchhoff.
Present. We do have a quorum. Would everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's see. No presentations, no awards tonight, no personal appearances, so we'll move on to staff reports.
Thank you, sir. I would ask Miss Erica Hill to make a report for the city clerk's office.
Thank you, sir. Council, the City of Peculiar is hosting the Joint Cities meeting on February 18th. If you wish to attend, please notify the city clerk's office by Thursday, February 12th. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Hill, was that I thought that I got an email today said it was the 19th, Thursday the 19th. Is it Wednesday or Thursday?
The email I got was Wednesday the
Wednesday,
18th.
okay.
I received that same one, sir. It is Wednesday. Thank you, sir. I would ask Mr. Cataret to make a report for the Community Development Department.
Thank you. Two items this evening. The first is to alert the council of a scheduled Good Neighbor meeting this Wednesday, this week at 6:30 p.m. here in the council chambers. This Good Neighbor meeting is at the request of Randy Salee of Salee Homes. He owns a tract of ground in Original Town. This tract is on the west side of Monroe Street between Elm and Plum. It's an undeveloped tract of land, a half a block of land that he purchased. The reason for the meeting is his request is will be to change the zoning of the property. He has not yet filed the application, but intends to do so. But he wanted to have a good neighbor meeting to be able to talk with residents and adjacent property owners. His plan for the property is to change the zoning from single family to multifamily. What he intends to do is, currently he has the right to put 6 single family homes there. What he'd like to do instead is build 3 buildings, a total of 13 units. So 2 buildings will be 4 units, 1 building will be 5 units, centered around a small parking lot area with access off of Monroe Street. This would be a 1-story building. Each one of the units would be 2-bedroom, 2-bath. They would be age-restricted senior housing units. They would be 55 and older residents only. And he, again, will be at the meeting on Wednesday to be able to talk with the neighbors and any interested property owners about his specific plans. So anybody is welcome on that. More information is available on the city's website regarding the plans. It actually shows you illustrations of the plans that he has. And then going over the upcoming Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, next Tuesday, the February 17th, a week from tomorrow, the commission will have a work session meeting. And then on March 3rd, the commission has one item on their agenda. It's a proposed site plan for a office building for Lonnie Branson for his real estate office, and for Matt Davidson, his State Farm office, to locate on the lot immediately adjacent to and west of Country Club Bank. So they intend to build an office building there. I actually have a total of 4 tenant spaces, so they'll take up 2 and they'll be renting 2 of the tenant spaces. But that site plan is scheduled for the March 3rd Planning Commission meeting. So that's currently the items under review.
Thank you, Mr. Cataret. I would call on Mr. John McLean to make the report for the Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Staff did submit a written report in this week's packet, as you guys have seen probably. And topics that I would like to highlight: park staff have been capitalizing on this unseasonably warm weather by planting trees in Moon Valley Park. We've also been watering trees throughout, the ones that we placed in Good Park and some of the other areas over this last fall. Recreation staff have been planning the spring special events and searching for sponsorships. The upcoming events that we're working on are Touch a Truck, Jog with Your Dog, and the Easter Carnival. Staff have been collecting spring sports registrations. Soccer and volleyball registrations close on the 23rd of this month, and then baseball and softball close on the second week of March. As of right now, February 25th through the 27th, Park Superintendent Steve Rulo and myself will be attending the Missouri Parks and Recreation Association's annual conference. It is held in Springfield, and this year the focus statement is a state of health and happiness. That is the summary I have presented for you guys tonight. I will entertain any questions.
Thank you for your report, Mr. McLean. I wanted to commend you and staff. I was out at the parks last night shortly before dusk, and there were several people using the disc golf course. And I took kind of an impromptu survey of those people, very pleased with what's been done so far and excited about the back nine being completed later and the rest of the tee pads. And I can see your hard work there, and it's paying off for our citizens. We have an item coming up on the agenda tonight later on about the renovation of the ball fields. Put forward to us by the Parks Board. Does that include the overhead shade structures that would shade our spectators and shield them from foul balls, or is this just fencing around two of the ball fields?
Just fencing, backstops, and dugouts.
I see. And in your opinion, are we really at a point where we really need to replace those fences out there? Because in my opinion, when I went out and looked at them, they look like they're in pretty good shape.
Yes, my opinion would be at this time, because what we have looked at, I looked at the revenue generation and the safety. Those are the two main things. With the safety being first, those fences leaning the rustiness, the sharp edges, the new fence will be coated, as well as the backstops having that curve over the close to the plate, the home plate, which now does not meet specs most of the time. Anywhere you go with new ones, they're straight up 30 feet, and that's what we're going with. So that way, if a foul ball comes up and hits the fence, it doesn't reflect right back down or deflect back down right on top of the official, the umpire behind the plate, or catcher or the batter. So those straight up fences help prevent that. As in the aesthetics and the appeal to that park for revenue generation, that one, with the infield fines that we did this last year, we jumped our tournaments up. As of right now, I have penciled in 11. 2 years ago, we had 1. So not all of those have locked in with their deposits, but that's how many I have penciled down. I do have some that have locked in, and so they were excited to see that. They're excited to see more, as well as sponsorships, those sponsorship banners on those outfield fences. That's where we're planning to move those. If we move those back to that area, the fence that we currently have, you might have noticed, is leaning because they're just set with one bag of Sackcrete. The new proposed plan that Mr. Rulo will be going over tonight, it also has a mow strip, which is a 12-inch wide strip of concrete that will go underneath the fence all the way around. So it helps keep that fence sturdy and hold the support of those banners of the new potential sponsors and additional sponsorships that we're looking at gaining.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions?
Joe?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to say I had a student that was working on a research paper on the disc golf last week, and I asked him, how many courses that he knew about, and he, of course, knew about this one and some others, but I think it's something I've had quite a few students that have been excited about. I know our scout troop has used it back early, I think, October. But also, to switch gears, since we were already talking about the fencing that we have now has lasted about 20 years,
Correct.
according to what I read. The bonded vinyl covered fencing, what kind of lifespan does that seem to have?
It should extend it almost double, is what they usually say, almost double with the coated fence.
Thank you.
Not a problem. And thank you guys for the report. I will take that back with the disc golf. I would like to add to that, since you both mentioned it, we do have potential Eagle Scout that came to the park board meeting last week and has presented to set the back 9 discs for us as his Eagle Scout project. So the park staff will be working with that gentleman and his crew to set that back 9. Right now it's scheduled for March. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just a couple items to add. The work session for next Monday night is canceled due to President's Day. And the Arts Commission meeting, since you all's meeting with them last week, has set their meetings for the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. beginning in March. So they are underway. That concludes all staff reports, and we would entertain any questions from the council.
Questions? Thank you. All right. I'll entertain a motion to dispose of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve our proposed consent agenda, namely item A, City Council minutes for January 26, 2015.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Move on to unfinished business. We have the second reading of Bill 3037 by title only.
The second reading of Bill 3037 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into a guaranteed pricing contract with Design Mechanical, Inc. to provide preventive maintenance services for HVAC systems in public facilities.
I'll entertain a motion to,
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3037, award of contract HVAC preventative maintenance services.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to approve the second reading of Bill 3037. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. We have the second reading of Bill 3038 by title only.
Second reading of Bill 3038 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into a guaranteed pricing contract with Mark I Electric Company, Inc. to provide on-call electrician services.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3038, award of contract on-call electrician services.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the second reading of Bill 3038. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. We have the second reading of Bill 3039 by title only.
Second reading of Bill 3039 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into a guaranteed pricing contract with Clifford Power Systems, Inc. to provide preventive maintenance services for emergency generators in public facilities.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3039, award of contract for generator maintenance services.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve second reading of Bill 3039. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Next takes care of old business. We'll move on to new business. With the Bill 3040 by title only, please.
First reading of Bill 3040 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving a conditional use permit for a monument sign to exceed the height requirement for the property located at 1921 West Foxwood Drive in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Your staff report.
Thank you, sir. I'll call on Mr. Cataret.
Thank you. Bill 3040 proposes a conditional use permit that would allow the owners of the Golden Corral Restaurant, which is at 1921 West Foxwood Drive at our Raymore Galleria Shopping Center, to increase the maximum height that's allowed for their monument sign. It would increase it from its existing height of approximately 6 feet to 8 feet. In your packet, I did include an aerial photograph of the property. The particular sign is in the northeast corner of the property, right at the corner of the entrance into the Galleria Shopping Center. As the request requires a public hearing, it was advertised for this evening. I do want to enter into the record the notices that were sent to the adjoining property owners, the notice of publication in the Journal, our Unified Development Code, the application that was submitted, our growth management plan, and the staff report submitted to you this evening. As well, I included in the packet a letter from the applicant and a photograph that was taken by the applicant as well. The site plan for Golden Corral was approved back in 2013, and then the permit for the monument sign was approved in December of 2013. The permit was for a sign that would have been 6 foot high and just under 32 square feet as required by code. The zoning of the property is what dictates the size of the monument sign under C3 zoning when you have a single tenant, a single use on a commercial lot. That tenant is allowed a monument sign of 6 foot high and 32 square foot. That sign also has to be at least 5 feet from all property lines and outside of a visibility triangle at the intersection of roadways. And the Golden Corral sign did meet all of those requirements. I do want to note, indicated in the staff report, that the location of the sign was chosen by the applicant when they came in for, initially for site plan and then for the permit. The applicant had the ability to put the sign, in essence, anywhere along 58 Highway, as long as it was at least 5 feet from the property line, and outside of any easement. And the only easement that would have conflicted is an easement on the very west side of the property line, next to the fence that runs along the Dean property. There is an easement there. So, but they would have had quite a varying area of where they could have put the sign on the property, but it was chosen to be in that location. As far as the height of the sign, again, in your staff report, I included an illustration that shows how we measured the existing height of the sign. I thought it was important for us to know exactly how high the current sign is. And the way our code allows the sign to be measured is from, specifically for a property that might have a different elevation than what the adjacent street may be, is we allow a property that is lower elevation than the street to actually raise the sign up. So as we measure it, it would be at least 6 foot above either an adjacent sidewalk or the adjacent street. This property does slope from north to south, so it does slope down, and so the parking lot area of the property is below the pavement elevation of the street. We measured the height of this sign for permit purposes off of the sidewalk at 58 Highway, so it did allow the sign to be elevated up above the grade of the property. The exact height of the sign was measured at 5.85 feet, so just under 6 foot in elevation. I also, in your staff report, included a couple of elevations of the wall signs that are allowed. Any freestanding building is allowed to have 3 wall signs, and they determine which side of the building they want to put the sign on. Signs are allowed at the rear of the building if that's what the applicant chooses. The owners here have installed 2 wall signs. One would be on the east facade of the building, and then one would be on the north facade of the building facing Foxwood Drive. The maximum size of the wall signs are allowed to be 10% of the facade area upon which they are installed. All the wall signs for Golden Corral do meet the requirements of city code. The Galleria Shopping Center sign, which is adjacent to the property, is compliant with city code. It is 30 foot tall. It does identify some of the tenants that are located within the shopping center. With the shopping center's permission, tenants are allowed to place a sign on the monument sign for the shopping center. So that would be between Golden Corral and the owners of the shopping center, whether Golden Corral could put a sign on, at least a placard on their sign. That does not count against what is allowed for signs. So if they have permission, they would be allowed to add their sign to the Galleria Shopping Center sign. In discussions with the applicant before they filed the CUP, we did offer 3 options for the applicant that would provide perhaps some visibility or more visibility for the restaurant. First, certainly they could add an additional wall sign to the building. They could put a sign on the back of the building if that's what they chose to do, if they felt that would have some visibility to traffic along 58. As I mentioned, they could add a sign to the Raymar Galleria Shopping Center if they had permission. But most importantly, they have the right to move the sign, to relocate the sign. The issue that the applicant raised to staff was that there's a hill as you go from Dean Avenue and head eastbound, approaching the Raymar Galleria entrance. And that hill temporarily obscures the monument sign from being seen. So the option that I offered was simply relocating the sign to the crown of the hill, which would be certainly within code and would make the monument sign more visible. As staff went through the application and considered the request, we spent a lot of time analyzing the site, analyzing the view shed that eastbound drivers have of the Golden Corral restaurant. And while we do agree that the monument sign is not visible from the Dean Avenue or from a distance off of the property, certainly the building and the sign on the building are very visible. We measured at least 300 feet from the Golden Corral property away, and you can still see the sign on the building, and you can still see the building. And this is before you even get to the Dean household, the Dean farm home that's there. You could see the building. And I mention that because in Raymore, the Golden Corral restaurant is the signature design and signature colors of the corporation. So everything about that building shouts out Golden Corral. We don't make them hide their colors or hide their signs. It's a very visible building, and that is what drivers see even before they reach the entrance into the shopping center. And I say that because I think that's an important element of the application. Is the monument sign may be hidden down the hill, but certainly the building is not, and the building's quite visible for eastbound traffic. I also want to mention that since the adoption of the sign code, which goes back to 2003, and that's when we went away from allowing pole signs and all the new signs had to be ground-mounted monument signs. We've had a total of 13 businesses come into the city on independent lots, and all 13 of those businesses have complied with our sign code, 6-foot high, 32 square foot sign. I remember back in dealing with many of these businesses, they wanted to do something different. There were unique circumstances about many of those businesses that maybe visibility wasn't ideal, but in all those instances, each one of them did comply with the sign code. In your report, I included the findings of fact that were issued by the Planning and Zoning Commission. I just want to identify a couple of things under the staff recommendation that we gave to the Planning Commission. Can I mention the code's been in place since 2003, and the commission has spent a lot of time talking about the sign code over the years. As you can see, we've done amendments in 2008 and almost every year since 2008 in trying to tweak and modify the sign code to make it as business friendly as what the commission was comfortable with. They have not adjusted the sign height or size for monument signs, so they've held steady with that, and they feel very comfortable with that specific requirement. Can I mention the options that were identified to the applicant? Staff feels pretty strongly about that, and based upon that, staff recommended denial of the request to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission did have their public hearing back on January 20th, and they did vote unanimously 6-0 to accept staff's recommendation and forward the case to the City Council with a recommendation of denial. I do want to note for council that Bill 3040 is prepared in the affirmative. So if that bill is voted on for approval, it would approve the conditional use permit as requested. As I indicated, the applicants included a letter for your consideration with their application, and I included the photograph that he took of the sign, and also included the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting so you can see the discussion that the commission had. So that concludes staff report at this time.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the concise report, Mr. Cataret. With the P&Z voting 6-0 against, the applicant's bringing it forth before the council. Am I correct that it takes a supermajority of the council to approve this tonight?
It does not. It simply is a recommendation coming towards you. If there was a protest petition filed by adjacent property owners, then the 2/3 vote would be required, but simply because the planning commission recommended against it does not require the 2/3 majority vote.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Carteret, last night, in anticipation of this, I took my family over to Belton. As we were driving back at dark, I was driving past this, and I was trying to visually check to see what the applicant's concern was. I stopped at the light at Dean, and of course, for some reason, there was a house in the way of everything, so I couldn't see Lowe's, Golden Corral, or Steak and Shake, or anybody. I crested the hill. I got to the blue adoption sign, which puts me almost actually next to the Golden Corral property line. So I couldn't see Golden Corral all the way up to their property line. Now I'm starting on a decline, and I come to the intersection, and I had difficulty seeing this sign. And I understand that it's set down a little bit from the road. I then ate, I don't mean any offense to the applicant, I did not eat at Golden Corral. I ate at an adjoining restaurant whose sign is actually lower than the Golden Corral sign, actually. But I went and stood at these points, and I'm 6 foot tall, so I am the sign height. I'm standing at point 3, if you look on the page 150 of our packet sign with the 3 points denoted. I could see the top crown of the sign, which led me to believe that that settlement had occurred and the sign may have shrunk a little bit. Is it outside of the scope of the applicant to go in and re-terrace that to get the sign up to the sign height limits? That's the first question. The second question is, when this was done, you denote the height of the 3 points. Was this taken at the time the sign was put in, or at the time the applicant filed for this permit?
I'll start with the second question first. The measurements were done at the time the application was filed. So the permit allowed the sign to be 6 foot above the sidewalk. I too wanted to know the exact height of the sign. I wasn't convinced that it was at 6 feet. So that's why we did the elevation of it to get the exact height, that it was 5.85 feet. So it is slightly under 6 feet, but not by a lot. And that is, again, measured from that point 3, the sidewalk along 58 Highway. The applicant would have the right to raise the sign to 0.15 feet if they wanted to, but they wouldn't be able to go above that without a conditional use permit.
Okay. Follow-up question. Now, the sign has 2 sides, and obviously this is for traffic and people walking. The side that's facing Steak and Shake, which would catch the line of sight of westbound traffic, has no problem. I drove it, easily see the signage. On the other hand, from the east side, I guess it would, for me, why would the applicant even want a sign there or have that sign displayed if it can't be seen? Why is point 3 the pivotal point? People traveling eastbound would actually be further to the west. Why wouldn't the line of sight be more diagonal to that higher elevation?
Under the current writing of the code, it requires us to do the elevation at a point closest to the sign, so the sidewalk elevation closest to the sign. Granted, if point 3 were at the crown of the hill, then the sign would be able to be elevated, but that is not how we measure sign height.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you. This requires a public hearing, so I'll open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to come forward, speak, state your name, address for the record.
Mr. Moorhead comment, and that's what we are facing. Why we waited probably 11 months or so to come here, because really we're busy in opening restaurants and managements and all this. But we have been receiving lots of comments from citizens of Belton and Raymore that it is hard to see the sign when they're coming eastbound. We invited people from Grandview and Kansas City, Missouri to come, and they kept driving way to Culver, and they called me and told me, well, turn around and come back. So Golden Corral Corporate themselves, who come to inspect the restaurant for quality and all this, they missed the building even. As Mr. Morris said, when you stop at Dean Restaurant, at Dean Street, and you start going, there's hell here. And this is the problem we're facing. There is a hell from Dean going east. And you don't see the sign unless really you know or somebody told you where's Gold Corral is, and then you start looking to the right. Mr. Goddard, Jim took the picture that he showed you, and I asked him this in the zoning commission meeting. How did you take it, Jim? You were facing east, or you were facing this way? You were facing that way. You were facing the sign when you took the picture. So you anticipate that the building is there, and you switch your head to the right to take the picture. People coming from the highway, and I'm debating to put a billboard even, and the highway costs me $2,000 a month, and when the people get to Belton and turn left, keep driving, and they miss Golden Corral, I'm losing the $2,000 without increasing my business. And they keep driving east, and they end up eating somewhere else. Yes, this sign in a slope, yes, there is settlement. I measure it myself. I know how you measure it. It's about 5.75, so 1 inch were different, but no, I don't care. I'm not going to argue about an inch. The problem is the sign is not visible to the people come from east, period. There is settlement, yes. It is below 6, yes. Now, the staff recommendation to put a sign in the west wall of the restaurant, the sign, Golden Corral, the big sign, $40,000, and it will be not seen by anybody except the trees and the house who's blocking it. Some of the zoning members said there will be a development in Dean Street. Well, wait for it, because I know Ferguson stopped doing it, and Lane, I talked to them because I'm interested to put Taco John's in there. They're still hesitant about it. So the sign in the west wall, I don't have the $40,000 sitting around to spend, it's not going to help me. Now, moving the sign, Jim, west, me and you, we looked in there, and my son-in-law, we looked in there. If you guys take the time and look at it, there is a slope. Here's the sidewalk, the easement, and drop about 6 feet. Moving the sign there is not going to help me either, and it's going to cost about probably $25,000. We have a bid on it. But we have a bid from the guy who put the sign. He's in St. Joe, Missouri. We told him we need to increase the elevation. 3 inches, 5 inches, 1 foot, 2 feet. He said, doesn't matter to me, it costs you about $2,000, and we can live with that. If we are going to raise it to make it 6, as the ordinance says, for heaven's sakes, we are asking to raise it 2 feet. The ordinance of the city of Raymore have a special request. The members of the zoning commission, as Jim noticed, and the chairman said, why don't we approve it for a period of time and see what happens? Other members say, no, we're not going to set a precedent for other businesses to use. Gentlemen, if you put in your ordinance, there is a special condition, special circumstances for businesses and citizens to use, then use it. Otherwise, remove it from the ordinance. Why you have it in the first place? If you are afraid to set a precedent, then remove it from the ordinance. Don't waste my money and my time, the staff time, your time, and all of that. So either you use it or remove it. So I don't have to apply and waste your time and my time and my money. But the city manager told me there is a special condition. Jim told me, yes, you can apply. So we did apply. The zoning people were with it. They want to grant us, but they said, no, we don't want to set the precedent. Other business will come and ask for it. Well, we have no input, as Jim said, from any other businesses about our request. If they have concern, they will come in by email, by phone calls, or to the meeting. We have none. So my request to you, yes, we need more visibility. Everybody's seen the Ryan sign from 1,000 miles or 3 miles or from the highways. Yes, it has been there for many years. But again, we are asking you to use your ordinance for a special request for special circumstances. If you don't use it to set a precedent, then remove it, please. So somebody else in the future will not waste his money and time and your time and the staff time. If you have any question, I'll be glad to answer. Yes.
Is it Mr. Weva? Is that your
I
last
am
name?
Dr. Tayyim. I'm his father-in-law.
Okay.
I'm a retired surgeon, and I am part of the investor in the business.
Let me ask you, if I understood correctly, you said that to move the entire sign further to the west was going to cost, estimated around $25,000?
Yes.
And to raise it 2 feet would be around $2,000?
Yes. And also moving to the west, I looked at, honest to God, it's not going to help. It's going to be the same problem because of the slope. Where you walk in the sidewalk and he's dropped 6 feet. You go there and look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Close the public hearing. Entertain a motion to dispose of bill.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would, since Mr. Kellogg made an excellent point and question before, since this comes to the council not with a legal protest, this motion either can be in the affirmative, which would be to approve the sign thing and override the Planning Commission and staff recommendation, or it may be in the negative to disapprove this. In either event, it will be a majority vote to approve, since then there's been no legal protest. The motion can be in either form. That would not be true if there'd been a legal protest, then it would have had to have been in the affirmative and would require a 2/3 approval.
I'll entertain a motion to dispose of bill 3040.
Mr. Mayor, I move to not approve Bill 3040, the Golden Corral sign conditional use permit.
Second.
We have a motion to not approve bill 3040. Please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, and for everyone, the questions asked, this is a really awkward situation for everybody, because this is a situation where we have a very good and respected business member of our community who has a realistic and reasonable request regarding the placement of a sign. The problem is, and what I'm struggling with here is, and I hope everyone will at least reasonably consider, is the request here is to change the sign from height from 6 to 8 feet. That's it. The problem is, and the applicant even kind of hinted at this, we have a weird location there, and the problem is this dipped area. 2 feet's not going to make much of a difference. When I drove by that, the biggest thing that I noticed was I couldn't see the sign at all until I got up on the property. 2 feet's not going to make that sign get any more glaring for me. The questions asked of staff for me indicate that there was an attention paid to try to follow our code, which is well established. Our sign section has been chewed on numerous times through amendments to our Unified Development Code. And the height of signs has been looked at numerous times as well. The problem that I have here is it's just a bad sign location. And in fact, what I guess I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds here, but really, if there wasn't a house immediately to the west of it, there'd be a great location for a sign. But that's not what we're confronting with today. What we're confronted with is the rules are in place. These rules do not help the applicant. Respectfully, I would say that the very limitation of this sunk-in property existed at the time when the engineers were building this. So respectfully, I would have driven by at 7:30 at night and I would have had a temporary sign lit up there to test how high is that sign. An engineer should have known that that sign wasn't going to be high enough the moment it was put in. So the problem here today is there's a realistic problem for the applicant, but I don't think adjusting this ordinance is going to address that. I think it's still a problem, but it's a problem with the location itself, not with the application of the UDC, and the 24 inches isn't going to solve that problem.
You would have to reopen. The public hearing's closed.
Councilmember Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go back to and bring in some history from back when I was on the P&Z. Some of the longest nights that we had during the UDC was over the signs. I think Jim will attest to that. There was many nights we went to 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I also remember, and this is no fault of the current owners of the Golden Corral, because they wasn't here, quite frankly. And they are a new business since the UDC. I remember having Dr. Leonard sit right beside me down at the end of the dais, and we sat down there, we hashed it out over signs. And I remember Dr. Leonard going out recruiting, trying to recruit business owners to come in and discuss the sign code, you know, and he was very passionate about it. And it was frustrating for us on the P&Z that we didn't get the input that we really thought we needed. Like Mr. Moorhead has spoken tonight, this topic has come before the council many different times since the passage of the UDC, and it is something that we see as a council continually to grow, be adapted, and all of that. I also remember fighting this height thing when Mr. Stevens and I refurbished these signs down on Darrowby and 58, and trying to hash out the height of those signs. Were we going to break the law there too? So I appreciate the work that goes into it, and all of the considerations in that. I've seen it in practicality. One thing that I'm going to give my opinion on is that I really appreciate the Planning and Zoning Commission not wanting to set the precedence. This is my reason for that, is that the unintended consequences of something that we do today is going to be coming back to us, you know, in another form of an argument and another thing. And pretty soon we've taken what we spent $75,000 on back before I was on the council to bring the UDC into play and tweak it. That cost us $75,000. I have a real concern of making another mishmash of what we had before that, you know. So I don't want to create unintended consequences of our actions here. So, but with that said, I also go back to what Mr. Stevens and I learned during the sign project we took on there, is that we discussed at great length, where do we measure from? We measured adjacently. You know, I tried to argue, well, let's take the average of the highest and the lowest in this site. Mr. Stevens says, no, I think it's adjacent. So, well, then comes into play, which adjacent? Is it the one on Darrowby or is it the one on 58? So all of those things come into consideration. One thing that I would suggest to staff, going back to the P&Z for discussions, is to look at widening or giving a broader definition, like what the gentleman has talked about at the crest of the hill, the sight lines. You know, if as point of discussion or suggestion, have a area in there, whether it be the property lines a average of that property height to allow for those variations, you know. I understand that the only avenue the business owner has is a conditional use permit. I understand that. But I want an ordinance that is workable for the whole community as a whole, not just a certain instance each and every time. I think the UDC, I hate seeing amendments come before us, and I think we've had 21 of them since I've been off the P&Z and been on the council. But it's one of those things that, I remember back in those days when we didn't have the input of all the wisdom, the knowledge, and the wishes and hopes of the business community, even though we were begging for it. Now this is where we're learning it, is here. And I just don't want to create a situation to where, somebody else comes in the next time and then they say, well, the heck with you, you did this with them. And this really isn't the first time that I remember a business coming, discussing, their concern about a sign height. I also remember vaguely CVS. They were concerned that their sign was so much lower than Walgreens' sign on the other side that they thought that Walgreens was going to have a disadvantage or more advantage of drawing in customers because of the height of that sign being different. So there's my concerns right there, being quite honest, and my suggestions to going forward and trying to improve our situation here.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Hubach?
I took a trip too to see what it was like. I came from the east, but I wasn't looking for any signs. I looked for the building, and I didn't have any trouble at all coming from the east and finding the sign that was on the east side. Then when I went on past it and came back again, then I saw it on the north, and I had my first thought was, when I looked to see the little monument sign, was that if it was raised up in any way, it would obstruct the different signs that were back behind it. And I wondered why the sign had even been put there in the first place, because it seemed to me that the ones on the building were very clear. They were high enough that you could see them, and I used those as my markers rather than the little monument sign.
Other discussion? Okay, there is a motion to deny conditional use permit, and a second. No further discussion? All in favor of denying? Motion carries unanimously. We have the first read, may we have the reading of Resolution 1507.
Reading of Resolution 1507, a resolution of the Raymore City Council approving the extension of the preliminary plat for Raymore Galleria North, located in the southwest quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 8, Township 46 North, Range 32 West, all in Raymore, Cass County, Missouri.
Staff report.
Thank you, sir. I'll call on Mr. Carteret.
Thank you. Back in May of 2013, council asked each time that a preliminary plat is brought forward for renewal that council be advised of the development status vis-a-vis the stream buffer ordinance. North 58 Equity Partners is the current owner of the undeveloped land in the Raymore Galleria North subdivision. And Raymore Galleria North subdivision currently contains the Firestone and the Belfonte Car Wash property. There are 3 other lots within the subdivision yet to be developed. The preliminary plat was initially approved back in June of 2010, and the Belfonte Car Wash was the most recent final plat in the subdivision that was approved in February of 2012. A year ago, the developer did come forward and request an extension, and a 1-year extension was granted. The current expiration date of the preliminary plat is set for February 13 of this year. I do note that the adopted stream buffer map does identify a stream on the proposed subdivision. However, in accordance with Section 455.040 of the UDC, the property is currently exempt from the stream buffer requirements. I also note that the property owner has taken a step and obtained a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers to drain and fill in the pond area that was existing in the southeast corner of the subdivision. You may have noticed, I believe, sometime earlier this year or late last year, in 2014, the pond was actually drained under that permit, and the developer at this time is proposing to do some site work on the property. I do want to also note that although the subdivision, if there's a valid preliminary plat, is exempt from the stream buffer requirements, any development would have to comply with our stormwater detention and our stormwater treatment provisions of the code. As I mentioned, the applicant did submit a site grading plan for city consideration. The proposal under this plan is to regrade part of the property, specifically the area along 58 Highway, to make it pad ready, to make it more visible that it's ready for commercial development. That would also include extending the private drive that's behind the car wash in Firestone, as well as extend the water main, and there would be a new detention basin constructed as part of that site grading work. The stormwater control for the property, it would comply with the code in assuring that the 100-year storm event is controlled. The developer is also taking extra steps beyond that, though. They would be providing stormwater control for the 2, the 5, and the 10-year rate events. And those are the storms that typically cause the streams to overtop their banks on a regular basis. So they are going above what the minimum requirements would be, and we felt that was very important for this development to contain those smaller storm events. The applicant has requested a 2-year extension to the expiration date of the preliminary plat. Resolution 15-07 includes language that would grant the 2-year extension. So if council wants to take other action, you would need to amend the resolution. If the resolution is granted, the new expiration date of the plat would be February 13 of 2017. And at this time, I believe Mr. Fearborn has some additional staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Carteret, for that report. Jim, if you could go ahead and put up the preliminary plat diagram that we were looking at during DRC last week. Yes, thank you. Oops. It's all right. Thank you.
I need to broadcast that.
Can the council see that on their screens at this time as soon as Mr. Carteret is done with his IT iterations? Thank you. When we were looking at this and Mr. Carteret was reviewing this presentation during Development Review Committee last week, staff noted that on the left, basically the north, he's highlighting it now on his screen, that particular area is what council will remember was the CIP project, Ryan's Access, which was originally put into the CIP in 2010, removed in the CIP this past year. I asked staff for a little bit of the history of the iterations that led to it first being put in and then being taken out. The taking out portion of it is probably the most germane to this particular conversation, and it seemed to fit in well with the preliminary plat application because it could be one of the last times you see that before you. Staff had received the assigned write-off on giving this access to their property with the understanding on their part that the dark shaded area that is the access would be moved to the north, that block that you see just above that, which would allow for a straight shot, if you will, through to the drive that serves the area that we're now talking about with the extension of the preliminary plat. Block was hesitant to sign that at the time for a couple of years. So we asked Mr. Corwin, who's in the audience tonight, to come in to perhaps have some better face-to-face communication on what their concerns were with not granting the access to the north. I let Mr. Corwin know that it would be my intention, regardless of where the access was, to reinsert that into the CIP, either as an amendment this year or for the CIP next year, because prior to this, I did not actually realize that there was a granted access that was already in place. As you can see from the diagram, the problem with the access as it currently exists is it's a bad turning movement. It's not aligned, and we also had some concerns that Ryans would not approve it in this particular location, but signed off with the understanding that it would be moved north, and they actually wanted it at the north location. It does turn out that there were some communication issues. I think Mr. Corwin would be prepared to come up here tonight and kind of outline those, but staff did work out those communication issues with Mr. Corwin this week, and he came in tonight just before the meeting to let us know that they would be willing to sign off that access. It will be our intention to turn in a secondary application to Ryans to receive their okay. If we get both of those sign-offs, then we would be prepared to bring back this access point in the 2015 CIP as an amendment in this year. Just want to let council know it pertains, but it doesn't to the preliminary plat application, but it's very good news, and if council will indulge me, I would ask Mr. Corwin to come up and maybe he can just real quickly outline what their original concerns were and how we ran through those. Steve?
Steve Corwin with Raymore Galleria. Yes, our original issues with that were really twofold. One was a liability issue going back to Galleria-owned property when you've got turn movements coming out, and clients and customers of Ryan's coming out onto Kentucky Avenue, where if there's any liability to us, it's their customers coming out to use the traffic signal, and the liability issue, the wear and tear on the road that's there from their customers, and also the total turn movements from our MOU with the city. When we put the two tenants in there, we have, if we exceed a certain, and I believe it's 25 turn movements onto Kentucky Avenue, we have to construct a deceleration lane in the westbound lane of Highway 58. Our biggest concern was that turn movements would be counted, coming out of Ryan's would be counted against us, would force us to construct that without having even any more development go on in the Galleria. We've got that worked out with Jim, and that not being the case, we were willing to move the easement.
And staff certainly appreciates the ability to have them come in, have a frank conversation with us, and the good neighbor approach that they're taking to this. And we really do feel like having that straight shot through reduces the liability risk for them that we're trying to avoid as well. So it's kind of an all's well that ends well with that particular package, we think.
I'll entertain a motion on resolution 1507.
Yeah, can we have our screen back?
Jim, can we have our screens back? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, as a point of order, could we ask questions of staff first before a motion is entertained?
Sure. Questions of staff?
I just have a couple of quick questions. Two questions. First of all, I'm just curious, how much would this plat change to comply with our current codes? And second of all, is what we're talking about as far as that drive something that could happen in a one-year extension?
To your first question, the most significant code change that's occurred since the preliminary plat was approved that they don't have to comply with is the stream buffer. The caveat to that is they have the core permit to, in essence, eliminate what is classified as a stream on our stream buffer map. It really is more of a swale between an upper pond and a lower pond. But with the core permit to remove the lower pond, there really would be nothing to buffer. So there may be other impacts, and unfortunately, no matter what, they have to comply with stormwater treatment and stormwater control. So that's really the key code changes that have occurred.
To the second question, the council has, of recent history, granted both 1 and 2 year extensions. I do not believe that the length of the extension impacts the discussion on Ryan's.
Mr. Mayor, if I might ask a question from Mr. Krass, just to refresh us on stream buffer order. If you can, since we haven't looked at this a lot, since this has been the stream buffer, part of the UDC was passed this summer, I believe, or last spring. Is the buffer order, I know that's not, it's not necessarily an issue in this case, but I thought while we're looking at it, is the buffer order, is it from 1 going lower to 6, or is 1 the largest and 6 would be the smallest, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around.
Okay, thank you. So that means that these are very small, very, very small, anyway.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution 15-07 with an amendment adjusting the resolution to change the 2-year extension to a 1-year extension.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 1507 with the caveat of a 1 year.
The purpose of the amendment to a 1-year extension is more to remain consistent with really the direction the council has taken for the last 2 years, or at least that's the request here. In this particular instance, I do want to note that, especially reading the staff's packet here, this applicant has been very responsive to the city. We have a good relationship with this applicant, and it's important to note that going to a 1-year extension by no means is meant to be a critical statement to them. It's just that we want as a city to keep these plats moving, and to make sure things get revisited within a certain period of time. This by no means is a message to send that this is a final extension, especially in light of the fact that the applicant has had such assertive movement with this development, but just that we could revisit it after a year, and I'll even go out and opine that I would be more than happy to grant continual 1-year extensions. So there's no concern for me on that. It's just as a general principle, I think we've kind of leaned toward these 1-year plat extensions so we can kind of keep things in review.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would echo that too. My support of a 1-year extension by no means has any reflection on the developer. You're great neighbors. I wish I could say that all of our developers were as responsive as you folks up there in the Galleria over the past years that I've been on the council. We don't always get that cooperation. It's very nice to hear staff say that it's an open, honest, earnest dialogue. Thank you for that. But my intention to support a 1-year is for consistency of the others, where we're trying to deal with less aggressive or less astute, developers. So again, I appreciate everything you've done, Steve. Thank you so much. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Any comments? Yeah, there's a motion and a second to approve Resolution 1507. Amended. All those in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Here we have the first reading of Bill 3041 by title only.
First reading of Bill 3041 by title only. An ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, adding Chapter 655, Solicitation for Charitable Donations, to the Raymore City Code.
Staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll call on Chief Turnbow. Chief Turnbow. Is she behind me? Is she behind me? And is she?
I've only been here almost 3 years. It's okay. I'd be happy to have Chief Turnbow come up and give this report, actually. The majority of the council will remember that this topic of discussion was raised as a result of complaints that we had received for individuals and organizations that were soliciting in intersections throughout Raymore. Primarily up near Walmart is where we deal with this issue mostly. When we originally came before the council back in October, we had just had a group that had been soliciting, causing significant traffic problems there at 58 and Dean. And as a result of that, initiated the discussion about providing some safety provisions. And I know that you all, in the proposed ordinance, see that, everything that we're recommending is for the safety of the individuals, both participating in the activity, the solicitation for charitable donations, but also for the traffic that's flowing through there. We want to make sure that this activity occurs, during daylight hours, that there are not an overabundance of people in those intersections, and they're wearing safety vests and that type of thing. So all of the discussion in the subsequent work sessions that we had with you all was to add those types of at least additional restrictions that would provide for greater safety for both the participants and the traffic flowing through. Just coincidentally, we just had this same activity about 2 weeks ago. We had a warm weekend, and we were back out at the intersection at 58 and Dean because it was the same type of activity, not a legitimate organization, no credentials, stepping out into traffic, causing traffic problems, and our officers were responding to that. So, I would certainly think that we can anticipate, next warm weekend we'll be facing this again, I'm sure. Are there any questions
of staff? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion. Dispose of Bill 3041.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3041, charitable donation solicitation regulations, with the following amendments. Under section 655.040 subsection A, the first line after the word streets to include and public right-of-ways, and then on section D to change the dollar amounts to $1 million per claim, $2 million per occurrence.
Second.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second to approve Bill 3041 as amended.
Mr. Mayor, the purpose for making the adjustments to the request to approve this bill, I'll start with the second point on subsection D. During the last work session when this was discussed, the $300,000 $1 million amount was a number that was thrown out during the discussion that staff notated. It's important to note, after reviewing the footage of that, Council Members Westcoat and myself requested that those amounts be increased. I'm not accusing staff of making an error here, but at the same time, there was a reason for the change, and that is the city already carries a $1 million per occurrence amount as it is, and so we run into a scenario where the applicant and the city would have concurrently equal amounts of liability coverage. Therefore, if there is and can legally have a claim that could exceed that, we have no ability to receive subrogation of that added amount. Making it a $2 million per occurrence amount is a very small and minimal increase to the insurance cost, but the applicant, since they would be the one that would be creating the risk, would be the one to share with that additional cost that could occur from that, and that was the rationale for that. On the subsection A, the purpose of adding the "and public right-of-ways" is, I feel that the interpretation of "on public streets" literally interprets on the public street. We are concerned about people stepping into the street, and I know that our current instances, that's primarily their main method of communication with the drivers, but my concern here is also that the solicitation could interfere with vehicles on the public streets. And I would hate to see somebody usurping or working around this regulation we're putting into play because they stand on a curb and with a 4-foot stick and a basket reach out, and therefore, while not in the street, they are basically still violating or still being in relation to this. And my concern is if they are interfering with vehicles that are moving, these become projectiles. Interfering with the car is just as dangerous because of how the car could react to the interference, which would create the same public safety concern that we're having. Other cars could get hit, and worse, other people could get hit. So I'm asking for a little expansion on the definition of public streets.
There's been Councilwoman.
Would this be an appropriate time for a question about your amendment? Yeah, okay. I'm just curious, by adding and public right-of-ways, would that potentially keep groups who are car hopping at Sonic from standing up near the road with their sign saying, come into Sonic, and because we're working here today? That would be a big concern of mine. And like someone who's not really trying to raise money on the streets, but standing beside the street, inviting people into a parking lot for a car wash or into Sonic for their fundraiser there.
That's a very good and accepted question, and that was one of my concerns in viewing this. One, I know we have an instance where there's an individual who stands on a sidewalk with a guitar. First of all, that is not a charitable donation or requesting, so that wouldn't apply. But my thoughts were regarding, for example, car washes. We have a business in town that likes to open up their parking area to that. The concern I have there is the right-of-way setback is not significant, and people would still be able to stand near the street and display signs. The concern I've had, and actually the car wash one, was just before when we talked about this at a work session, where there were several children standing and there was some horseplay, and one actually stepped out into the street. And my concern is, I personally, I'm not saying other people have to feel this way, having a 12 to 15-year-old standing within 2 to 3 feet of a car moving at 45 miles an hour, to me, is a concern. I respect the fact that it's not as great a concern as the people who actually do step out into the street. I'm just concerned that somebody could look at this, see the volume of restrictions we have here, and find that if 2 feet are on the edge of the curb, they usurp this. So that's kind of the reason for that. It's not a strong concern, but I'm worried about the loophole.
Other questions? Joe?
Clarification, Councilmember Moorhead, when you say public right-of-ways, I based my second on thinking that it included the sidewalk as a public right-of-way. Is that the intent or not?
Well, the sidewalk, especially in the area of the previous question, that is where they were standing. I'm not saying people can't traverse along sidewalks at the same time. Actually, sidewalks are for transportation. They're not for standing and obstructing the sidewalk for the purposes of soliciting donations as well. It defeats the purpose of the sidewalk itself.
In the second part to question, when we mention 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds, this mentions that you need to be 17 years or older to solicit for a charitable donation. So really, we should not have children near the street if this is passed.
Well, and that's actually a very good question, but the dilemma here based on this language is it only applies on the public street. So that's why I'm trying to add the geographic area and expand that. Yes, it would mean, though, that the solicitors would have to be older than that. Under this circumstance, though, it's only if they stand in the street.
Would it be okay for children to be behind the sidewalk with a sign saying come into the parking lot if they were away from the public right-of-way?
Well, as long as they're in that setback, beyond that setback area, then they're perfectly fine, which still puts them reasonably close to communicate with the public that's traversing on the street. So they're still able to do the solicitation, they just can't stand next to the street or near the, right immediately near the street.
Thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Abdul-Gawad.
Maybe I'd like to direct this question more to Mr. Willerth or Chief Zimmerman.
I knew that was coming.
I mean, as far as interpreting this, would the interpretation be that the people that this applies to are the ones who are actually accepting money? If they're not accepting money on the street or accepting money in that public right-of-way, then it wouldn't apply to them. I'm thinking, again, like at Sonic, and if you've ever done fundraising at Sonic, the way the property really drops off past the sidewalk, it would be nearly impossible to stand beyond the sidewalk with a sign because it's really a drop-off there. And I just want to ensure that those groups, especially there that fundraise, wouldn't fall under this. If they're not taking money there in the street or they're in the public right-of-way, would this even apply to them?
The spirit, you're exactly right. The spirit of what we were proposing in the ordinance was that if the individuals that were actually out, soliciting for the donations had to be 17 years or older. But we were actually thinking, and not of Sonic, but more of Dairy Queen or places like that come in for a car wash. So, younger children could stand the setback, off of that public access or right away, could be younger than the age of 17. We just didn't want anybody that close to the street that was that young. Because we did have, as we've mentioned in past work sessions, we have had instances where we have been contacted by groups of Little League and very young children that they wanted to be able to solicit on the street corner, and those children are just too young to be that close. As someone mentioned, even the horseplay of kids that young, out there that close to the actual street, we just didn't feel comfortable with them being that young and being that close. So yes, being set back and past the public access, we felt like the age was not as much of an issue.
So kids younger than 17 would not be allowed to stand on the sidewalk in front of Sonic? Only if they're actually taking money or if their group is car hopping at Sonic? That's my question, is where's that line?
Under this ordinance, the activity that's being regulated is the solicitation, which is not just the accepting, but requesting or appealing by oral or written, and now with the amended, or by gesture, the money. So they shouldn't be doing any of that unless they're over 17, if they're within the street, and under the amendment, the public right-of-way. Which I was asking Mr. Krass how far the public right-of-way goes along 58, and its answer might be of interest to you.
The right-of-way extends about a foot behind the sidewalk, so really it's the edge of the sidewalk is the edge of the right-of-way.
Councilmember Boehner.
So I want to look at this from maybe a little different perspective. And from my understanding, the right-of-way, the boundaries are essentially set by survey, and that's how they're platted and put on our plans. An average citizen or an average person coming to having met the insurance requirements and everything else, how do they know? What would they need to do to be able to comply with the law? And then after that, are we expecting our officers to keep in their heads a mental map of where that line exists?
Mike, do you want me to? With regard to the officers, and I mean, I will admit to, I didn't realize that access was about a foot behind the sidewalk, but that certainly should be, easy enough for the officers to be able to, tell if either they're too young to be in that area, if the public right-of-way becomes the amended part of this ordinance, to be able to tell, and certainly, obviously, if they're too young to be, in that area. But if they're behind that area, basically, as Mike said, either a foot behind the sidewalk or in that area behind the public right-of-way, we should be able to tell that fairly easily from the street.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, Mr. Krass, I don't know exactly where the sidewalks are for some of the prime locations for the people would want to solicit for donations or that. But one thing that does ring a bell, and that concerns me as far as right-of-way, is that in some cases down 58, the sidewalk is back off the street maybe 5-6 feet. In other areas of the city, that sidewalk goes right to that curb. I don't really think that's a sidewalk. I mean, like when you go down, especially over in, when you first cross over into Belton, even though we have nothing to do there, those sidewalks are right there alongside that street. They just reconstructed them. Now, I believe that our sidewalks out in front of the Walmart and the mattress store and Sherwin-Williams there, those are out right there alongside the street. Where does our right-of-way, where's the right-of-way at that point? Does it end at 1 foot behind that approximately, or does it go further back?
I think it's a generalization that typically the sidewalk is set 1 foot inside the right-of-way line. And where you've got some of those other areas there, that there just may be some more narrow right-of-way, which caused the sidewalk to go up against the curb because the grass strip would have been too narrow to maintain, and it creates more of a shy strip for folks and a sanctuary for people to walk along there. It's that way along Foxwood Springs because of the retaining wall and some others, but it's a generalization that in general we set the sidewalk 1 foot inside of the right-of-way line.
And if I could point out to the council member's question, the code as it is currently written that was brought to you at the work session only allows solicitations between Dean Avenue and Johnston Parkway. So the sonic question becomes, under that circumstance, moot. There could be no solicitation at that location.
All right, we've had a motion and a second to approve Bill 3041 as amended. Is there any other discussion? All in favor? Bill passes unanimously. Nope. Okay, I'm sorry. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. 7 in favor, 1 abstention. We have the reading of Bill 34. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to offer Councilmember Kellogg the opportunity to list his reason for abstention if he wants to.
Thank you, Councilman Holman. Appreciate the opportunity. The only reason why I'm abstaining from this is because the way in no disrespect and no slight to Councilman Moorhead, but the amendment is to cover 2 separate sections. One was to increase to the public right-of-way instead of just the street. And then the other one was for the raising of the insurance bonds and that. I support the language dealing with the right-of-way. The other I do not, so for me to vote yes or no would be contradictory to either one, either way, so I'm going to abstain from that, and that's my reason. Thank you, Mr. Holman. Thank you.
Reading of Bill 3045 by title only, please.
First reading of Bill 3045 by title only. An ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into an on-call surveying services contract with Huffman and Associates Land Surveyors, Inc. to provide on-call surveying services.
Staff report.
Yes, sir. I'll call Mr. Krass. Thank you, Mr. Freeborn, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. From time to time, when we are working on our in-house design projects for the CIP, the engineering department has the need for some professional land surveying services. The typical tasks that are performed with this include right-of-way staking, preparation of easements, and gathering of topographic information. Currently, we have several projects in the pipeline which will require these tasks. We will need some easement assistance on the Gore Road water main project. We need some topographic information for the Aspen Street sidewalk project along Cemetery, and also
we need some legal work and an easement and a description prepared in order to prepare a deed to facilitate the turnover of Remington Plaza. If you council recall, that is the private road that goes between the Walgreens, Orchlands, and the McDonald's that we are working on taking over maintenance responsibilities for. So we solicited qualifications from land surveying firms. We received 7 responses and are recommending the engagement of Huffman and Associates land surveyors for this initial engagement. Mike Huffman has provided these services on several recent projects for us, performed very well, performed in a timely manner, and we recommend award of the contract.
Questions of staff? Jay?
Mr. Kress, at work, I occasionally get accused of only knowing how to do one thing, and what they say is, let's go do something you know something about. Translation, let's go to lunch. My question is, are these services, as we pay for them in the bid, are they a la carte, or is this a buffet style?
It's on a case-by-case basis, so we would define, thank you. This was a professional submittal. The tasks are so varied, what we will do is, as a task arises, we will negotiate a fee for the individual tasks.
Thank you, and thank you for putting up with my Ozark American humor.
Other questions of staff? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to dispose of Bill 3045.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve Bill 3045, award of contract on-call surveying services.
Second.
We've had a motion and a second to approve Bill 3045. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. The reading of Bill 3046 by title only, please.
First reading of Bill 3046 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Orr Wyatt Streetscapes for the Farmers Market Site Work Project, City Project Number 15-206-201, in the amount of $172,493.25, and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders within established budget constraints.
Staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. I'll call on Mr. Krass.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to have Mr. Carteret broadcast the final site plan to you. I don't think we had last presented a concept plan. We received bids for this project, and the low bid was received from Orr Wyatt Streetscapes in the amount of $192,800.45. The current budget for this project is $150,000. So staff met with Orr Wyatt and kind of talked over some of the features that were being included in the project. They came back with some suggestions that are actually we consider some enhancements, and are actually going to result in about a $22,000 savings over their original bid. One of the first things they recommended to us, originally the parking and the drive aisle was going to be asphalt. They've actually found a way to make that concrete and be more cost effective. So overall, that's going to be more durable. We also had included a retaining wall along Washington Street. They've taken a look at the grades and feel they can actually grade the site, and rather than a retaining wall, perhaps put a curb on the edge of the sidewalk, so we lose the sidewalk there. One of the features we had put in, if council will recall, we're trying to reestablish kind of the railroad history theme there, and the shelter is going to be more of a depot type concept. Was we included an artistic feature you see there in red along the sidewalk, which was to represent railroad tracks. And we had originally looked at a number of different ways of doing that. We settled on bidding pavers, and pavers have become quite expensive. And so what the contractor is recommending, and I've seen it elsewhere, and it works real well, is they are going to saw cut the pattern and then stain the concrete. And it's very durable. It's going to be the stain penetrates very deeply. So we've been able to save all of the design elements that we had come up with, and the final scope of the project. The contract amount is $172,493.25, and we do recommend award of the contract to Orr Wyatt Streetscapes.
Questions of staff?
Just briefly, I just want to make sure that I understand that the escalation that we've seen in the cost is essentially boils down to an increased scope of services or an escalation of cost, material cost over the time that we initially budgeted the amount?
I think it's a little bit of both. We ran quite a few numbers based on other bids we've received, and it was real close or slightly higher than 150,000 when we ran our engineer's estimate. Comfortable enough that we felt we should bid it, but I think, you know, this was competitively bid, and I think it's just the current bidding environment that caused the increase in the prices.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to dispose of Bill 3046.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve Bill 3046, award of contract Farmers Market Phase 1 site work.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Bill 3046. Any discussion? Mr. Mayor, please.
I want to know why it's costing us 30% more than what you all had anticipated. Normally, when we have bids that are that skewed, we come back and we rebid them and we find out we make some changes, because we've only allowed 150,000, and yet you're talking in terms here of 172. And if you get rid of the smallest one and the largest one, the others are in the $200,000 range, and that's over $50,000 more than what we have budgeted for that. I don't think that we should spend that kind of money without knowing exactly down to the last dollar what it is we're spending it for. Because as we go along here, we've got some baseball fields, and we're within $1,000 of what it's going to cost to do it. But this one, we're way out of line. And this is a neighborhood park as well as a farmer's market. And to me, there's nothing in here that shows that the young people or even adults have got a place to play, and it's too much money for just the farmer's market. I am very much opposed to it, and I will be voting no.
Councilmember Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It says here in the, I believe the third whereas, let me see here. Yeah, third whereas, including contingency to accomplish this project. This is the $189,742.25, including contingency. How much is the contingency percentage on this particular project? Do we know?
Mike, was it 8 or 10?
We're asking for a 10% contingency. If I may, part of the reason is that if you recall, this is the old Public Works bank buildings and all of that. Now, you know, we've done some test holes. We believe when those buildings were demolished, all of the rubble was removed, but there is potential that the contractor may encounter some unforeseen things when they are grading the site that require some other disposal and such. So that's why we are recommending a 10% contingency.
Councilmember Boehner. Councilmember Burr.
I just wanted to say that I just ran the numbers, and it's more of a 13% increase. If you look at the 172,493.25, it's a 13% increase over what was budgeted. The original bid was 192,800,000 or 800 was around 27% increase. So sounds like that some of the redesigns helped us save 14% or so.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say real quick that I know that a lot of the people in Old Town are excited to finally see something going on in this park. I think it's great that we are preparing it to make it more accessible for people to use during the farmers market, and we have future plans to put a park there and to add more amenities for people who might walk to or drive to that park. I love that staff has worked really hard to put some of the artsy things in there, to bring in the history. I feel like there's been a lot of thought going into the planning of this park. I think stamping the concrete is a great idea. That's going to make it a lot easier for people to walk on maybe than the pavers would have. So I'm happy with that choice. I wanted to point out too, real quick, Ms. Hubach, on page 236 and 237 in the packet, there's actually an itemized list of all of the costs and all of the things that come with this. So I feel like we can see exactly what we're going to get for our money here, and I feel like it's money well spent.
Derek?
You know, I'll first say that I respect Councilmember Hubach's concern here, and I've been on that same side of that argument when looking at bids. And unfortunately, and we've had a few that have come before the council that have, without any fault, have been grossly disproportionate to the amount that was initially budgeted and prepared. It happens. On the other hand, in this particular instance, you know, we have bids that just because of various market reasons just were a little different, a little higher. Nothing grossly disproportionate. And the one thing I want to say is, you know, as we have looked at working on this farmers market site, one of the things I've been very proud of and respected is the idea that we are putting a lot of attention and quality into this. This is not just throwing some basic sidewalks up and throwing a couple parking lots here. Everything from the theme, everything from the unique design, the entire farmers market design itself is a little more aggressive than just throwing a few things out there. And in that particular instance, it's not beyond belief that we could, and I think I'm screwing up my words here. Councilmember Burke had pointed out it's a very small percentage deviation here. So while I agree with Councilmember Hubach that any deviation deserves a look, and so I respect the rationale. I think this is a reasonable one. There are a number of bids here that clearly could have been higher. We're picking the lowest and the best, and I mean, I think we're going to get some good results from this. So I do support this.
Councilmember Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I asked my previous question, it was in regards to Bill, the next one coming up, 3047, the amendment, budget amendment. But it's still germane to this because it's common that we have a 10%. Sometimes it's even up to 15 or 20%, depending on how specialized of the services we're asking a person to provide. I don't see anything disproportionate here. I see the value to the city. I've seen the farmers market over the years that it's just blossomed, and it's one of those things that it just kind of landed in our lap. The community has accepted it and proven to this council member that they like it. And they want it to continue to blossom and grow and become everything it can be. And I don't see anything disproportionate here. I see this as a step in the right direction. And, you know, the reason for that question of, you know, what is the contingency, when we're talking $192,000 for one bid, you know, 10% of that, $19,000, that is a chunk of change. So, you know, that can easily jump the vision or the view of a project, you know. And let's keep in mind that the contingency does not mean that they're going to spend it. It's in case there is a contingency. If it isn't spent, it goes back into the budget where it came from.
All right, there's a motion and a second to, I'm sorry. Councilmember Hubach?
A farmer's market is supposed to be produce that is produced by a farmer. That's the concept behind it. I've been to this farmer's market here in Raymore week after week after week, and most of that has been reselling of things, people that have glass products, people that have wood that they have worked on. Those are not necessarily what you think of as cabbages and corn and things of that nature. What would, if the farmer's market ceased to exist, how would this area here serve the people of Raymore as a city park? I just don't think that when you talk about pavilions, that is not something that we need. If you wanted to talk about a shelter house, that's something else. But some of these things that we're doing, we can't even find enough money to spend on the 79 acres that we have right close to the city hall. If we can't spend any kind of money for them, why should we go overboard on a 2-acre piece of ground that only meets a certain need, the farmer's market? And till we are a true farmer's market, I'm not in favor of spending any more money than we have to.
Councilmember. All right, go ahead.
This is regarding that, but I'll state it to at least anybody who will listen. You know, we call it the farmer's market, but in the early discussions of this, really this is a city park, and it is going to be used for a lot of functions. And yes, I'm glad we're using it as a farmer's market. I will point out I do get some amazing cinnamon rolls there that are farmer related, although I have bought some wood stuff there too, and I'm not complaining. But I do admit, especially as Mr. Forborn, Mr. Crass, and our Parks Department has brought stuff to us on this, there is more to use here in this area. And, you know, I especially envision our Parks Department utilizing this where they really haven't had this type of space to platform activities. So this is really, while we're calling it the farmer's market, I like the fact that we're really doing a capital improvement on a public use area that is going to be widely used in a lot of ways, and this phase offers a lot of that initial infrastructure for parking and that introduction to get that started, so I'm very supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will clarify what I say is farmer's market. It's more of a place setting, a title of an area, of an idea. I just came back this morning. I left Des Moines, Iowa at 2:30 in the morning. I got back to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've been up since then, so that my voice is gone. I'm a little tired and maybe a little cantankerous. But one place that I did visit was Valley Junction in West Des Moines, Iowa. And when you go to Valley Junction, you will see that it is very similar, except bigger than what our vision is here. They have an actual depot there. They actually have some of the historical railroad tracks running from it. They have a pavilion very similar to what we're talking about building here. The thing about it is that they're also known as a farmer's market on Thursday night because they hold one of the biggest farmer's market in central Iowa. You know, now, do they sell corn on the cob and apples and stuff like that? Only when they're in season. You'll see when you go down there for that 3-block area lining both sides of the street and around the corner in front of the pavilion where they have bands playing, that there are people there painting little children's faces with clown designs. There's people there selling Afghans for cats. There's people selling stained glass windows. You know, but is it all produce? No. But is it called something else other than the farmer's market? No. It's widely known that, you know, it's the Valley Junction Farmers Market, and everybody knows what you're talking about when you say the farmers market. You're not going to go there and get every fresh produce you ever wanted, but you're going to go there and you're going to enjoy and you're going to remember the experience you had there. If you've ever been to Valley Junction on Thursday night, I guarantee you will remember it.
Afghans for cats.
Afghans for cats, sir. It's an Iowa thing, yes.
An Iowa thing. All right. There's a motion and a second to approve Bill 3046. Go ahead.
Just a rhetorical question. Surely we cannot be suggesting that we're going to curtail free commerce just because it's not vegetables.
Well, this sounds more like a flea market than it does a farmer's market.
I'm going to call the question.
Mr. Mayor, I was excited to see some of the design elements tonight for the first time. For me, with the railroad markings, I would think that people in the Raymore Historical Society would love this aspect to it. I have spent 2 different years where I've taught Cub Scouts about the history of Raymore, the history of Cass County, the burned areas, and it would be much more exciting for those children. It's part of the curriculum in Cub Scouting to actually go to this park and have the lesson there, as opposed to sitting in a church Sunday school room with no windows. Whenever possible, I took my Cub Scouts to Moon Valley Park, and afterwards we could have a good time there. After we did the education part of it, we spent a lot of time in the woods, and to me this looks like a fabulous place to add to our city. So I'm very supportive of it.
There's a motion and a second to approve Bill 3046. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? There's 7 in favor, 1 in opposition. Motion carries.
Wait. The other one.
You have the first reading of Bill 3047 by title only.
First reading of Bill 3047 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the fiscal year 2015 capital budget.
Staff report.
Thank you, sir. I'll call Mr. Grass.
Thank you, Mr. Fairborn. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jim, could you put up the other photo? I just wanted to share with you, we were going to bring both of these forward to you this evening, but we're still kind of working out the architectural features for the dormer. This is the final design of the, Jim's broadcasting it to you as well. This is the final design of the dormer, or of the depot rather.
Mm-hmm.
There's a railing on 3 sides, the hip roof you can see, and then the covered entryways. And we're still working out the architectural features on the entryways there. So that, but the good news is this bid did come in slightly under budget. So what staff is asking for at this time is a budget budget amendment in the amount of $39,742 to cover the cost increase for the site work and a contingency. And hopefully we can get the architectural features worked out and bring this forward to you at your next meeting.
Questions of staff? Thank you. All right, Dana.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3047, a budget amendment regarding Farmers Market Phase 1 site work.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Bill 3047. Any discussion? Favor? Opposed? You in opposition or are you in favor? Okay. Opposed, 1. Favor, 7. Bill passes. The ordinance passes. Thank you. You have the first reading of Bill 3042 by title only.
First reading of Bill 3042 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Geyer Fence Company and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders up to the budget amount.
Staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. I'll call on Mr. Rulo.
Thank you, Mr. Fairborn, Mr. Mayor, and council. Hopefully this won't be too repetitious from earlier, but the park board has budgeted $75,000 in each of the fiscal year 2014 and 2015 capital budgets to replace 1 backstop and fencing each year for a total of 2 field renovations by the end of fiscal year 2015. The approved 2014 through 2018 capital improvement plan includes a replacement of a backstop and fencing for the remaining 2 fields to conclude the renovation project in 2017. Staff issued a request for proposal on December 4th, 2014 for the 2014 Field 6 and the 2015 Field 8 Recreation Park Baseball Field renovation project. Proposals were received and opened on December 30th, 2014. A total of 3 proposals were received. The lowest best bid was submitted by Geyer Fence Company. Staff has checked references and found them to be satisfactory. Staff recommends award the contract for the baseball field renovation project to Geyer Fence Company in the amount of $147,000 and that the city manager can approve change orders up to $150,000. This project was brought to council with a 7-to-1 approval by the park board. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Questions of staff? Okay.
Steve, do you remember the initial discussions on this and when this was first entered into the CIP?
I want to say the discussion started back in 2012 and brought in 2013 for CIP.
I think that's right. Do you remember which Parks Board member brought this forward?
Which Parks Board member?
Yes, sir.
I think it was recommended by Parks staff, and then the Park Board members.
Brought forward by Mr. Kennedy. Was inserted into the
Yes,
CIP,
to the
by
CIP,
Mr.
yes.
Kennedy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Questions? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the one person that opposed the vote, did they give a statement as to why? I didn't see that in the report.
The one person, it was Mr. Harris, the council member, or not council member, I'm sorry,
The chair.
Chair Harris. He just doesn't feel that we should be spending $150,000 on that project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. During the discussions with the park board, and this kind of piggybacks something that Councilmember Holman brought up earlier, because I myself went out there today and was kind of looking at the fence, and I'm not seeing a lot of deterioration on that fence. I mean, there are points that are, and I think I think I really appreciate the answer earlier, hearing that the shoring up of the outfield poles, I could sense as a problem, especially with signage on there. But at the same time, has the park board discussed alternative programs to, or alternative projects to do, or reprioritizing this one? Because I remember we talked about this last summer during the budget discussions, and I know there were some other issues regarding the ball field that were equally prioritized. So what kind of discussions have the park board had?
Well, like I said, the discussion came out in the park board meeting last month. There was one person opposing it just because he felt that the money should be spent elsewhere. The other, there has been talk about just shoring up the outfield fences. I think the main concern came in where, at least for the past 2-3 years, at least 2 dugouts have blown off. We're replacing dugouts on a yearly basis, which is starting to add up to quite a bit of money. The one backstop on Field 8, one of the dugout roofs flew off and has damaged that. It's bent in probably about 3 or 4 feet, which is a safety concern of ours. Just little things like that.
I'll entertain a motion to dispose of Bill 3042.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3042, award of contract for the Recreation Park Baseball Fields renovation project.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve Bill 3042. Is there any discussion? Okay.
I want to state that I appreciate both Mr. Rulo and Mr. McLean's comments tonight. I thought they were very straightforward and honest in their beliefs. I was on Parks Board when this was inserted into the CIP directly by Mr. Kennedy, reversing the process that we had with Ms. Snook, where we took CIP to committee and it was brought to the Parks Board for discussion. Was not done with this project. I believe that this is the vision of our former Parks Director, who is no longer with us. And not only would we be authorizing basically $150,000 tonight, but the next phase is in 24 months to do another $147,000 for a total of almost $250,000. It's not a bad project. We just don't get enough bang for the buck to replace those fences. I've already stated I went out there and I walked them. They're workable. They're cities that would like to have what we have out there now. Can we make it better? Sure, we can do it for $300,000. I just would like to see personally, and would have at the time had we had the opportunity to take that $300,000 and either accelerate our enhancements to the farmers market, or to put a new amenity into Hawk Ridge, or build a new ball field out there. My understanding, that's one of the things that's kept our tournaments down, is our expansion ability and an ability to hold more than 4 games at a time, not the condition of the fencing. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, there is a motion and a second to approve Bill 3042. Any other discussion? All in favor? In opposition? 4, 5. And fails.
What was the count on that, Mr. Mayor?
We were showing a 3 to 4 down here.
What's that?
Staff is showing 3 in
Could
favor.
staff ask for a check on that, sir? We only saw 3 and then 4.
In opposition?
Mr. Mayor, I did not hear what the motion is for.
The motion is to approve Bill 3042. Yeah, Bill 3042. And I'm asking for those in opposition.
3042. No, I'm not in opposition.
Okay. Those in favor? 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
3, 4.
If it's 4-4, I don't know exactly parliamentary rules here on whether this is an ordinance or a resolution, but 4-4 would allow the mayor, the chair of the meeting, to break a tie. Does this fall under those? I'm going to ask the mayor for his opinion on that.
Yes, and I will break the tie in the affirmative.
Thank you.
All righty, now we have the first reading of Bill 3043 by title only.
First reading of Bill 3043 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the 2015 operating budget and reallocating the duties of the Buildings and Grounds Director.
Staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. The duties of the building, 10 years ago, when we got a new Parks and Rec director, and at the exact same time, within a few months, we got a new Public Works director. The strengths of those two individuals kind of reverse what you see in nearly every other city. Our Public Works director did not have a background in buildings and grounds, and our Parks and Recreation director had a great deal from her former city when she came here, and it was certainly one of her strengths, although I think even Janet would have admitted that when it got to larger projects, she was probably a little bit out of her depth. With the changeover, with Mike taking over in Public Works, and with Mr. Kennedy coming into Parks and Recreation at the time, and honestly, with the number of larger projects as buildings and grounds begin to get a little bit older here in the city, it seems a much better fit to the city manager to reorganize our organizational chart to reflect what most cities have, where the Public Works director is actually the director for buildings and grounds. Staff would make that recommendation from the city manager to the council. That concludes my report, sir.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Thank you. Jay?
Just to check in the numbers, this would move how many employees out of Parks and Rec into that department, into Public Works?
Currently, for this year, only the directorship would change.
I see.
What we are looking at going through the year is how much work is involved with Parks and Rec actually basically doing our outside mowing work for us. And we would move the appropriate staff then back into Parks and Recreation, their salaries associated with that. With this and the next item on the agenda, staff anticipates, quite honestly, a wash between the two as far as who's paying for what in the upcoming years.
Very well put, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Bill 3043, budget amendment regarding Buildings and Grounds Director.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Bill 3043. Is there any discussion? Kellen?
Quick comment, Mr. Mayor. I thank staff for the foresight and the research behind this, of doing this. I think this is the right thing to do. I think it's correct, and I commend you for doing it. Kind of editorial here, you know. Times kind of dictated, and we fell into a very good situation 10 years ago, and everything worked out because of the commitment of our employees that we had and continued. And it just, I want to give the kudos to Janet Schnook, that our former Parks Director that used to be here. She was wonderful. She did a very good job. And also commend the two gentlemen, that Steve and Mr. McCain, what they're doing over there too. It just kind of gives a proof that, to me, that, you know, sometimes there's nothing more permanent than something temporary. And that's what this, I think, was way back 10 years ago. And look how long it's taken us to straighten this out, or get us to the point to where we make it consistent with the rest of the city. Thanks.
There's a motion and a second to approve Bill 3043. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And reading Bill 3044 by title only, please.
First reading of Bill 3044 by title only, an ordinance of the City of Raymore, Missouri, amending the 2015 operating budget and reallocating the duties and funding of the Community Outreach Coordinator.
Staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. When this position was first created in the city, there was a vision that our Community Outreach Coordinator would be doing a significant amount of the advertising work and the publicity work that is associated with Parks and Recreation, in addition to working with general administration with the other city departments. Over time, it has become that particular position, a significant change has happened in the amount of time that he is devoting to each department. A lot of his time is under my direction, and actually I have handed that off to Ms. Hauk as far as direct supervision from the administration standpoint is concerned. He spends nearly all of his time here in this building doing work through the administration department. The amount of work that he's been doing for Parks and Rec has declined over the years. Administration is more than happy to take on the salary associated with that in consideration of the amount of work that we are actually directing him to do. We presented this to the Parks and Rec board. They agree with this move. We would still, of course, just like Mr. Worthington is assigned to other departments of the city for special projects, we would be more than happy to loan his services to the Parks and Rec department for the quarterly flyer, which is really the primary work that he is doing for them at this point in time. The city manager would recommend this change to the council for your consideration. Thank you.
Questions of staff? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to dispose of Bill 3044.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve Bill 3044, budget amendment regarding the Community Outreach Coordinator.
I second.
A motion, okay. Got a motion and a second to approve Bill 3044. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. That takes care of new business. Move on to public comment. Does anybody like to come forward and comment? Identify yourself for the record. Keep your comments under 5 minutes. Seeing nobody coming forward, move on to Mayor Council Communication. Beginning with Councilmember Kellogg.
I've said enough tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Holman.
Nothing this evening, sir.
Councilmember Abdel-Gawad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of things. First of all, this is directed to you, Mr. Moorhead, but to anybody in general. I think I have to agree with Mr. Kellogg. I didn't really like tonight the way the motion was made with the amendment in it. I would prefer, not that that matters to anybody but me, but I would request that we make a motion and then move to amend it so that we can discuss the points of the original motion and the points of each of the amendments. I just think that it makes for clearer discussion for the council. It also makes us easier, as Mr. Kellogg said, for us to kind of sort out and discuss the issues and vote on the issues rather than lumping them all into one big vote. And I don't know your reasoning behind that, if it was just to keep the meeting flowing or what, but that's just a request from me. I would prefer to discuss each issue separately and be able to vote on each issue separately. Secondly, I just want to mention real quick that the American Cancer Society Relay for Life for Ray Peck is having a couple of kickoff meetings coming up, and the kickoff meetings are a great opportunity for business owners, community members, anybody to just come up and see what Relay is all about. You can ask any question you want to ask. You can see all of the different parts of organizing the Relay for Life. You can kind of see what the campsites are set up like. The committee will do a few short presentations during the evening, as well as have tables set up with information. They're hoping to have an area where everybody can actually sign your team up for a relay that night or sign up as a participant. The first relay kickoff meeting is coming up February 26th at the Community Bank of Raymore between 5 and 8 p.m. And I highly encourage people in Raymore and Peculiar to come and check out Relay, come to the meeting and see if it's something you're interested in. It's a great night of fun. You get together your family, your coworkers, your friends, and hang out for the night. You take turns walking around the track or walk as a group. It literally is a relay where someone on your team is always walking. It's not a race. It's not you have to walk or run for 12 hours. It's taking turns with your team. For business owners, it's a great opportunity for community or for building relationships between your employees. A lot of the different teams make their own t-shirts, so you could absolutely advertise your business on your t-shirt, have something motivational on your t-shirt. Use it as an opportunity to remember or honor someone in your family who's experienced living with cancer. So if you get your family together to come, there are just so many opportunities in Relay, and so I just want to throw that out there yet again and invite everybody to our kickoff meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. Again, it's February 26th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Community Bank of Raymore. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Moorhead.
Tonight, before I came to the meeting, I was flipping through the TV channels, and I came across the government channel, and it showed a February 4th meeting or presentation from Foxwood Springs, and our city clerk, Jeannie Warner, was speaking during that, and it was great to hear her speak about matters of the city, and it just reminded me how wonderful it is to have staff who represent us community-wide as well as outside of our community, and the quality of their ambassadorship. I know that Ms. Warner is also being recognized coming up regarding her role statewide as far as being recognized through the city clerk. And I'd actually ask Ms. Hill, what's the actual title of the organization?
It's the Missouri City Clerks and Finance Officers Association.
And Ms. Warner is going to be the state president of that organization. So it was great to see her presentation, but it reminded me of all the quality we have of our staff, and it's great with that outreach, and the citizens seem to really respond, at least the ones that I saw on television, but I responded as well. So I just kind of want to give that acknowledgement, especially because I can talk about her because she's not here, so she won't write anything bad in the minutes on me. So thank you.
Councilmember Burke.
I had looked at the baseball stadium project multiple times on planning and zoning, and also again today when I looked at it. And in the discussion tonight, I spent 3 years as a groundskeeper for University of Missouri, working 20 to 30 hours a week for baseball, football, softball. And I want to say that I love the fact that we're going to have lots of diverse programs for youth and adults in our city. But as I listened to some of the statements that were made, it made me think about some of the costs involved and thought maybe $300,000 was a lot. And based on some of the experiences that I had working with the boss showing me how to do things, the softball field at the University of Missouri in 1991 was in heck of a lot worse shape than anything that we have here And I'm glad it's not that way anymore as an alumnus. Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens,
No comments tonight.
Councilmember Boehner,
Can't believe I got to go last today, but I don't have anything else either.
Councilmember Hubach.
I have nothing to add.
And I don't think I'll keep us any length of time, so I'm not gonna add anything. We have no executive session this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? We're in adjournment. Thank you, everyone.